Hey everyone, welcome to the video. This one we're going over the Thursday Night Football Showdown slate, the Vikings versus the Redskins. Before we continue though, if you could leave a like, and if you're new to the channel, please hit that subscribe button. It really helps me out. I really appreciate it. You can also follow me on Twitter at ChrisPinell16. And if you're interested in the spreadsheets about every single week in my Slack chat, links available in the description below for my Patreon. I think that's about it for that. So I say we get right into it. We're going to go down the list here, and I'll give my opinions on each guy that I feel needs to be talked about, which is pretty much all these guys. So we're going to start up top here with Dalvin Cook at 13,000, and right off the bat, I'm telling you right now, we cannot fade him. There is no way around that. He's been one of the elite fantasy plays this season, let alone just for the slate. He's obviously the top player on the slate, and the dude just doesn't have down games. I mean, 29 points week 1, 21 week 2, 27 week 3, 19 week 4, 28, then 13 versus Philly. But that's, Philly has got one of the best run defenses in the league, and he's still got 13. And if that's your worst game, 13 points versus one of the best run defenses in the NFL, yeah, you've been pretty good. And then he had 30 points last week versus Detroit. So he can't be stopped, and he certainly won't be by Washington. They're giving up 27.3 points per game to running backs this season, which is 10th most in the league. Another positive thing here for him is he comes in as a home favorite, and a massive one at that. They're 16-point favorites, and I love that out of my running backs. It's great correlation for them to be big home favorites. And he's a workhorse back too. He's getting 23 touches per game, which is 6th most in the NFL. He also sees work in the passing game too, which obviously helps boost his floor. And he also is the league leader in rushing yards this season. I know a couple guys had bye weeks, but still, he's leading the league in rushing yards as of right now. So yes, you're playing Dalvin Cook for the conclusion of this. You are going to play Dalvin Cook, but I know a lot of people might, not a lot of people, but I know some people might want to be a little bit different and fade Dalvin Cook. And if you're building 150 lineups, yeah, maybe you want to fade Dalvin Cook in a couple lineups in case he gets hurt or something. But if you're playing one lineup, he's going to be like, in the contest I play, he's probably going to be 95% owned. I'm not fading that. Maybe you can fade him in the captain spot, but even then, I don't know. I mean, I think he's going to be the highest scoring player on the slate. But, there's a chance that someone else pops off. And I know it's a tough price to pay, and it's kind of similar to Mahomes versus Indianapolis a few weeks ago, where he was priced in the 19K range and Dalvin Cook's 19.5K in the captain spot. So that is a hefty price tag to pay, and you're going to have to find a punt or not a punt or two, but you're going to have to find a punt in your lineup to make it work. But there's just a good chance he outscores everyone enough on this slate that you need him in there. But I do understand he does break the bank and makes you punt a little bit, but I think he's by far the number one player on the slate. If you want to captain him, I have no problem with that. But at the very least, I would get him into your flex spot. Then they say we have Kirk Cousins at 12,000. He's the second most expensive guy in the slate, and he's really turned it up the past 3 weeks. So, he started off the year horrendous, but, after the media frenzy with his wide receivers and kind of getting called out, he's been an absolute stud with nearly 1,000 yards and 10 touchdowns the past 3 games and only 1 interception. He also leads the league in yards per attempt over the course of the whole season, not just the last 3 games. And, yeah, it's 9.1 yards per attempt, which is, Patrick Mahomes is second with 9 yards per attempt. So Kirk Cousins leading the league in yards per attempt. It's kind of hard to believe. And he also has the best completion percentage in the league the past 3 weeks. So he's been great. Now, the only problem with him here is that he's very expensive, and I don't think this game is going to be very competitive. And his boy Adam Thielen is out, which hurts the passing game in general. I mean, I know it was fine last week, but still, obviously it's going to hurt without having one of the better receivers in the NFL on the field. And this can turn into a game like we saw earlier in the season where they barely threw the ball and just ground and pound the run game with Dalvin Cook and Mattison. So if you're choosing up top between Cousins or Cook, I think it's very obviously Dalvin Cook. But if you can fit both, I'd say that's fine, because obviously I'd like the starting quarterback on the more high-powered offense on the slate. And it is a beatable secondary that's been below average versus quarterbacks this season and wide receivers. So, yeah, I do like Kirk Cousins, but the price is very hefty for him. And if it turns into just a run game and you're paying $12K for a guy that's going to throw the ball, like 20 to 25 times, maybe, he's probably going to get about 25 to 30 passing attempts. I really don't think they're going to throw the ball too much, because I don't think the Redskins are going to make this a close game. So there is downside here. I mean, if you look at the beginning of the season, 14, 11, 12, 8, really turned it up the past few weeks with 23, 31, 32. But now Adam Thielen, they are a huge home favorites. So if this turns into a run game, you'll be disappointed. But if you do think this game stays a little bit close, or he just ends up throwing a whole bunch of touchdowns like he has recently, yeah, you can play Kirk Cousins. I got no problem with that. He's had 300-yard games in a row. So obviously, he's in form right now. But heavy price tag, and if I have to choose between him or Dalvin Cook, I'm going to go Dalvin Cook. But if you're making multiple lineups, yeah, get some Kirk Cousins exposure. And if you can fit him in your single entry with Dalvin Cook, yeah, I think that's fine too. It's just very hard to do because it does break the bank. So let's say you put in Dalvin Cook and Kirk Cousins just in the flex spot. it's going to leave you 6,250 left, which, that's fine. But I really want to get Dalvin Cook in the captain spot, and it's only going to leave me 46 left. So there is some punt options, but just letting you guys know what it does to your roster construction. And Adam Thielen's obviously out, so it's going to let us talk about Stephon. It's going to lead us to talk about Stefon Diggs, who is 11,000 in the flex. And yeah, you gotta love Stefon Diggs here, especially with Adam Thielen out. It's gonna make him the locked-in wide receiver 1. He's not gonna have to share targets with Adam Thielen. And the dude's been hot the past 2 weeks. He scored 46 points and 24 points. He has 19 targets over that span, over 300 yards and 3 touchdowns. So I do like the idea of trying to build around Cooks and or Diggs. It's gonna be hard to fit both, but if you can fit them both, then obviously that's great. I would try to choose one to at least build around, but obviously I prefer Cook. But they're just really far and above away anyone else on this slate in terms of projection. Maybe Terry McLaurin's right up there too, and obviously Kirk Cousins as a quarterback. But I'm just talking from a skill position standpoint. Washington is allowing the 11th most points per game to wide receivers, which obviously that's a pretty good matchup for Stefon Diggs. And Diggs also owns a 42% market share of the team's air yards, which is second in the NFL, only behind the next guy we're going to talk about, who is Terry McLaurin. I didn't really say too much about Stefon Diggs, but I think he's a fine play. It's just that he's very expensive. I think I prefer him over Kirk Cousins just because he's 1,000 less expensive. But we'll see. I really like Stefon Diggs, though, and Dalvin Cook and Kirk Cousins. But if I had to rank them, I'm probably going to go, I guess I'd go Cook, then Diggs, then Cousins. Just because I like. So Terry McLaurin at 9,200. I'm going to give him a pass last week as they were playing in a swimming pool where he only had 2.1 points. So he gets the pass there. Other than that, though, he's been great this season. 26 points week 1, 17 week 2, 19 week 3, had 8 points week 5 versus New England, but you get a pass versus New England as well. And still 8 points versus New England. It's not absolutely awful. I mean, most receivers would wish for an 8.1 point game versus New England, and then he had 29 points versus Miami. And, he's dominating the team's target share and market share pretty much. He has a 50% market share of the team's air yards, which actually leads the entire NFL. And I know it's not an exciting offense, but still, he's dominating in all these categories. He also has the third highest weighted opportunity share at 67%. I know it sounds like a tough matchup versus Xavier Rhodes and the Vikings, but this is not the same Rhodes that you're used to. He's been extremely mediocre this season, and there's nothing to fade anymore these days. And the Vikings are allowing 41.1 points per game to wide receivers, which is 8th most in the NFL. I do think a really smart combo this week on this slate is Dalvin Cook and running it back with McLaurin, as, the Vikings are going to be running the ball a lot because they're big favorites, and the Redskins are probably going to have to try to throw the ball a lot, which they're going to probably try to force feed McLaurin the ball, so I think it's a good correlation play. Not saying it's sneaky or anything. They're probably going to be two of the highest owned guys in the slate, but I do like those guys a lot because of those reasons. And McLaurin does have big game upside, and it's a beatable matchup too, and it's going to be tough to run on the Vikings, so McLaurin makes a ton of sense on the slate. Case Keenum at 8K, so we have another cheap quarterback this week, and Sam Darnold did not work out. I mean, the Patriots just absolutely ate him alive. What did he get, negative? You got negative something, I can't even remember, but yeah, that was gross. But Keenum, he's actually been serviceable in every single game that he started and finished. The one game he got pulled for Haskins, but other than that, he's been fine. Besides last week's weather game, we give everyone a pass in that game because it was gross. The Vikings are allowing the 5th fewest points per game to running backs and are much more beatable through the air, so I don't hate the idea of using Keenum, even though it's never fun to do so. He's pretty affordable for a quarterback, and I think he can get us around 10 to 20 points. And Minnesota's giving up about 19 points per game to QBs, so this is doable. And you can make a gross Keenum McLaurin stack. It's not the greatest stack in the world, but I don't hate it. And like I said, he's been serviceable. 30 points versus Philly. That's a favorable matchup. 16 points versus Dallas, 19 points versus Chicago. Those aren't the greatest matchups in the world. The Giants game, he got pulled, and then 15 points versus Miami. Then last week doesn't really count because it was absolutely disgusting out there. So really, he's not been that bad, and this is a beatable secondary, so I don't hate the idea of using Case Keenum here at 8K. He's pretty affordable, and he's got some upside. Not the most upside in the world, but, it's there. Obviously, you can't pay the backup quarterbacks. Vikings, though, at 6,800. So, do I like the Vikings defense? Yeah, I do. It's the Redskins, and they are huge favorites at home, but it's hard to justify paying this much for a defense that isn't the New England Patriots, because the Patriots are on a whole nother level. I do think they'll be okay, though, but I really don't like the price, but they can rack up sacks and turnovers versus Keenum and company, but again, I need touchdowns out of my defense at this price tag. If they were like in the 4K, like low 5K range, yeah, I would love that, but 6,800, they're priced like the Patriots are pretty much. What were the Patriots last showdown? It's like 72 or 78. I mean, they're worth it because it's the Patriots defense, but the Vikings, I mean, it's not like there's some elite defense. I know it's a great matchup versus Washington, but I don't love it. I mean, they had one good game where it's 16 then 12, but other than that, they've been kind of middle of the road, and they haven't I mean, they played Oakland. I mean, still, it's okay. If you want to play Dalvin Cook and Vikings defense as a good correlation play, I think that's fine. Kind of like what I said with Shoney Michel and New England defense, and that ended up being the money spot. So I don't hate it. If it fits your lineup, whatever. Just I'm not expecting too much out of the Vikings defense unless they score, which they certainly could. Defenses seem to be winning these showdown slates these days anyway. Then we have a fun play here in OLABISI Johnson, or BC. I've heard a lot of Vikings fans just call him BC. So he's our Adam Thielen replacement and played in 71% of the snaps. So he's on the field. Now, was he used? Yes. He was actually tied for the team lead in targets on the team with 8 and got a touchdown as well. Shorter touchdown, but still, it counts. And honestly, if you look at some of the film, he doesn't look too bad. Had some nice routes he ran, and this is a favorable matchup for the Vikings wide receiver group in general. And if you can't afford Diggs, I think he's a fantastic mid-range option. If you want to get really weird, you could throw him in the captain spot. Not my favorite idea in the world, but still, he's seeing the targets, and he's got some talent, so I don't mind it, especially versus the beatable secondary. So do you like OLABISI Johnson? I think he's going to be pretty popular at his price point. ADRIAN Peterson at 5,600. So he's dealing with an injury. I believe it's a grade 1 high ankle sprain. So it's not the most awful injury in the world. And he does intend to play. He said he's good to go. So, we'll see. But it is something to monitor up until pregame. We should know by then. Hopefully we know by tonight. Just give more time to help us make lineups. But this game is also versus old teams, so I know there's some extra motivation here for him to suit up and ball out. I'm not saying he's actually going to ball out, but I know he's going to want to suit up. Now, the matchup isn't great, neither is the Redskins O-line, so I do have legitimate concerns for him in this matchup. And since I do think they fall behind early, that should lead to more Wendell Smallwood work. And if AP doesn't score, you're probably going to be disappointed. And even if he does score, you might still be disappointed because he virtually offers you no receiving upside, and I can't imagine his yardage total is going to be too big. I mean, he had a good game versus Miami, but that's versus Miami. And then he had that, the swimming pool matchup versus San Francisco, so he just grounded the ball. Other than that, though, I mean, his yardage totals have been absolutely nasty. 25 yards, 37 yards, 28, 18. Miami doesn't really count. And then last week, it was the big rain game. So if he doesn't score, you're going to be probably upset. I mean, even in the game he did score, he only had 11 points. So there's not a lot of upside here. Don't love the matchup. So probably don't want to play ADRIAN Peterson, especially if he's dealing with an ankle sprain. I mean, just all the reason probably not to play him. Kyle Rudolph at 5,400. I actually don't mind him. I know he's been awful this season, but he did step up in the absence of Adam Thielen last week with his first good game of the year where he went 5 catches on 6 targets and a touchdown, good for 16 fantasy points. He's more than likely going to be a touchdown-dependent play to pay off here, but the Redskins are middle of the road versus tight ends, so it's not like it's a scary matchup or anything. He's not someone I'm like actively trying to fit in my lineup, but he's more of like hey, he fits at the end of my lineup. I have 5,400 left. Yeah, we can throw Kyle Rudolph in and hope for the best that he finds himself into the end zone. So Kyle Rudolph, he's kind of a map play for me, but he's not in play. Chris Thompson's out. Paul Richardson at 5K gross. He's been awful lately, and he has a measly 14% target share on a bad offense. That's gross. Maybe Minnesota pulls all their attention on McLaurin and things open up for him, and it's not like he's not on the field. He's playing roughly 75% of the snaps, but there's just really almost no upside here whatsoever, and he has a really low floor. I mean, 0 points the past 2 weeks, and it's not like he didn't play. Then 3 points, 4 points. They did have a good game versus Chicago. We had 23 points. Dallas, he had 10 points, and 7 points versus Philly, but he's really fallen off the wagon here. So not too much on Paul Richardson. If you have 5K left, you can throw him in there, hope for the best, but not someone I'm actively trying to fit in my lineups. Irv Smith at 4,800. He's the other tight end on this team, and he may be the more fun option at tight end. He's also cheaper. I think he's got more upside, and he's another guy that has to step up with Adam Thielen being out. So, and he did play 56% of the snaps last week, which is actually highest of the season, but it's not that far off from what he did in past weeks. I think he's fine. Again, these are just mostly secondary and tertiary options. I think that's the right word. But they're kind of just throw-ins at the end. I mean, I want Vikings exposure. I really don't want that much Redskins exposure. So if I can get any Vikings at the end for cheap, yeah, I'll take it. But don't love them, but don't hate them either. Mattison. So I wouldn't say he's not in play. I know he's the backup running back, but he may be a deep tourney flyer here if you think the Vikings absolutely obliterate the Redskins. He will get work in the back end of this game if you're thinking that way. And I don't even hate the idea of playing both Dalvin Cook and Mattison and just locking up the entire running back position versus the Redskins. Not saying that this is my first course of action on the slate, but it's a get weird tourney strategy. So if you want to play Mattison and Dalvin Cook together and just think they both go bananas because, say, Dalvin Cook gets 120 yards, 2 touchdowns by the third quarter, and then they just use Mattison at the end, and maybe Mattison gets about 50 to 60 yards and a touchdown. I mean, I can't expect Mattison to have too much ownership, so that could be a decent tourney strategy. Not saying it's my first course of action, like I said, but it's viable. The next guy is Dan Bailey. Kickers are what they are. I do prefer the Minnesota kicker just because he's at home and they have the higher implied team total. And it's like the Vikings offense is like downright elite. I know they've been great recently, but drives could stall out. Not saying they're going to, but they might kick. Maybe he gets 3 to 4 field goals. I don't love it, but kickers are what they are. He's cheap, allows you to fit in some other guys. Quan Treadwell, another gross play really here. He's 3,800 and I don't love it. He only played 14% of the snaps last week, and he's really not on my radar outside of mass multi-entry. He's more of just a blocker out there, really. So I don't like Laquan Treadwell, even with Adam Thielen out. Maybe he sees a couple targets, but he's probably going to have to fall into the end zone, which I really don't see happening. But he probably will now since I said that. Troy Quinn, another gross play at 3,600. He has a consistent role in the offense, but it's a very low floor and a really low ceiling as well. And he's going to really have to score for you to be happy, which is something he's yet to do since week 1. And he hasn't topped, 36 yards this season, and that was versus, Dallas week 2. But week 1 versus Philly, which is a beatable matchup, he had 13 fantasy points. He did get into the end zone. But other than that, 7, 8, 3, 2, 5. It's gross out there for Trey Quinn, so I'm not actively trying to get Trey Quinn in my lineups. If he fits at the end of your lineup, he's going to get some targets, but there's not a lot of upside there. Jeremy Sprinkle at 3,400. He's somewhat interesting. Vernon Davis is not going to be playing, so he's going to be the starting tight end, and he's played nearly 80% of the snaps last week. But again, like most of these Redskins, there's almost no upside here, but he should see about 2 to 5 targets, and it is a beatable matchup versus Minnesota, who's bottom half versus tight end, so I actually don't mind sprinkling in some Sprinkle if you need to. Again, don't love it, but it gets pretty gross at the bottom of this slate, especially with the Redskins are just a gross team in general. Dustin Hopkins, I can see maybe the Redskins can move the ball a little bit, but I can't really see them putting up a whole bunch of touchdowns. So maybe their drive stall out around the 40 to 20 yard line. That could lead to a whole bunch of field goals. It's kind of the same thing I said about Matt Prater a couple weeks ago, and it ended up working out quite well. So Hopkins, I don't mind him. He's only 3,000, so he's probably going to be pretty popular at that price tag. He's going to allow you to fit in some other studs like Dalvin Cook, Stephon Diggs, and those kind of guys. Redskins defense, it's going to be a pass for me. Wendell Smallwood, I think he's the last guy we're going to talk about, as I really have no interest in any of these other guys. So Wendell Smallwood at 1,800. So if for some reason AP is out, we pretty much have to lock in Smallwood here. He's going to be the main guy with Thompson and AP out. I do expect Adrian Peterson to play, though, so I would mainly move him to a pass-catching role, but that may do it at this price tag. Even if Peterson does play, I expect him to play a decent amount with the Skins trailing. Could get some work in the passing game. Maybe Adrian Peterson re-aggravates his ankle, knocks him out of the game at 1,800. I don't hate it, and if Peterson is out, you're going to get double-digit touches for 1,800. I will take that. So Wendell Smallwood's the last guy I'm going to talk about, and he's the cheapest I would go. So that's going to be it for this video pretty much. I have not tried to make a lineup yet, so we can just play around with it now. So let's just say we try to get Dalvin Cook in the captain spot. And then I'm going to go all the way down to Dustin Hopkins at 3K because I already know I'm going to need a value guy. That's going to leave me at 6,800 left. I am not sure. Maybe we can get BC in at 6,200. I don't mind that. And then Terry McLaurin I like a lot. Probably not going to be able to fit in Stephon Diggs. That's going to leave me with 1,100 left, so I cannot fit in Stephon Diggs. Maybe I can fit in Case Keenum. That leaves me 4,100 left, and then Dan Bailey. That's not the worst thing in the world, so maybe something like that. I'm not don't just go and plug this lineup in. I pretty much it took 20 seconds for me to put this together, so there's not a lot of thought to put in this, but this is just an example of what roster construction could end up looking like. But anyway, guys, that's going to be it for this video. If it was helpful, remember to leave a like, and if you're new to the channel, please hit that subscribe button. Really helps me out. Really appreciate it. I would really like to get to 3,000 subscribers soon. That would be awesome. I appreciate all the support on here. If you want to follow me on Twitter, at ChrisPennell16, and I'll see you guys in the next video.